Let's start with maybe something that you might like to talk about, certainly around identity, because these days we're hearing about identity politics. People are aligning with various groups and everyone's becoming an activist and they're pushing their ideas. Identity is really one of those things that has really captured our society, and perhaps not in a good way.
That is right, Neil. So identity is a word that has exploded in prominence in the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years. And it really is an entire philosophy. If you ask any child attending even primary school in an Australian school, have you heard about identity? They'll say, oh yeah, absolutely. And they might be just in grade 5 or something, and you might say to them, well, what is identity? And they'll start telling you. I've done this experiment a number of times. They'll say, oh, it's your sense of self, it's your understanding of who you are, it's your personal preferences, it's your desires, it's what you think you are, it's all, and they'll start telling you all of these answers. And, you can go onto ChatGPT, which is a great research tool because it synthesizes all the stuff that's been published when it gives you an answer. And you can ask it, what's identity? And it'll tell you, this is your self-perception. This is how you see yourself. This is all designed around your experiences in life. And they say, importantly, it's subjective. In other words, it's all about your feelings. And so you go through life trying to find out who you are based on how you feel at any given time. And that's where we're at. And, you might even feel like, well, you're not a boy, you're something else. You might feel like, well, you're not heterosexual, you're something else. You might feel any number of things. And, of course, the problem we're facing here is, well, what was always going to be the problem, which is that, is there anything less certain than the way a young person feels from time to time? And what you're finding is that young people lack certainty. They lack clarity. They lack any sense of a firm foundation. There's the tyranny of not knowing. Also, you've got this other problem, which is if who you are is entirely subjective, if it is only based on what you can see within yourself, it means you're actually causing young people to permanently look within and to permanently take a posture where they're not looking beyond this world or beyond their experience at all. And of course, what that means is that young people are losing hope, because hope is beyond us. Hope is beyond our experience. Hope is something greater, something that we look forward to, something that is beyond and greater than and above this world and our experiences. And so you are starting to see this problem of hopelessness creep into young people's lives. And if you look at the statistics, unsurprisingly, you see that hopelessness is an increasing issue. You see that the suicide rate amongst teenagers has gone up by more than 50%, nearly 60% in the last 10 years or so. You see that 13% of teenagers have had a major psychological event in the last 12 months. So that's doubled in 10 years. You see that that something like a third of teenagers have seen a mental health professional in recent times. The depression statistics are way up. The anxiety statistics are way up. We're seeing exactly what we would expect to see, which is hopelessness, and which is a lack of certainty and foundation, which leads to anxiety. And of course, nobody's asking the obvious question, well, when it comes to who am I really the only person who can answer that question? Is there something to be said for the fact that God created human beings, and that when God creates something, he embeds it with a certain purpose, and he embeds it with certain qualities and features that define what it is? And nobody's looking to God. Nobody's looking at creation. Nobody's asking, what does God tell us about who we are? And that's what I'm speaking about at a conference this weekend, is biblical identity. It's the fact that in the Bible we learn that God made us in his own image. That really means something. God made us for a certain purpose, to display his image. That's a high calling. What does that mean? It gives us something to do. Also, God made us to know him. There's another great purpose. But also God made us male and female. That means something, because God then goes on to explain why he did that, why he took the trouble to worry to make a man and a woman, not just human beings. And also God made us in other ways. And so we look at the Bible and we start to see, well, hang on, here in Genesis, you see that the way God made things answers some of the real dilemmas that especially our young people are facing right now.
So this takes us back, doesn't it, right to that Bible book of Genesis. And some might be thinking, well, can't I get that identity and that understanding from other places? Doesn't modern psychology tell us what we can think about identity? Isn't this something for the 21st century? Why are we looking back thousands of years BC to be able to find where our identity lies? What are your thoughts here as we come back into this Bible book of Genesis? Are there simple things that we can glean? Are there some things that we glean that we say, if we ponder on those for a moment, this is profound? What do we think about when we come back to that Bible book of Genesis?
Well, the reason we can go back to Genesis is because we find something in Genesis at that particular time in history and in that record that we don't find anywhere else. We find a world that was made that was not spoiled by sin and corruption. And so God looked at the world in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and he said, this is very good. Now, we've got to take that seriously. We need to sit up and go, wow, what's very good? And it tells us what's very good. It actually paints, a really solid picture of who we are, how we're supposed to relate to God, what our purpose is in the world. Now, of course, what happened after that was that there was this event called the fall. And the Bible doesn't teach now that the world is all very good. Jesus said the whole world lies in the wicked one. The Apostle Paul said the creation itself is groaning for redemption because there's been a fall, and because now we see that things are broken. We see that things are corrupted. We see that things are not as they should be. And we also see that our own humanity is corrupted. People are capable of greatness. People are very smart creatures. People are capable of tremendous civilization, philosophy, writing, building, and so on, and innovation. And yet people at the same time are such terrible creatures. We're capable of such evil. We're capable of destruction and murder and theft and deceit and lying, and our relationships that break apart left, right, and center, and there's carnage everywhere. So we're so great and we're so terrible at the same time. Why? Well, Genesis has the answer. We were made great, but we fell. And so in the Bible it says, well, hang on, let's go back to the moment of peak greatness before the fall, and let's see what was very good. And there are profound gems in there. And Jesus actually did this. Someone came to Jesus and asked him about marriage. And he says to them, well, haven't you heard that from the beginning God made them male and female, and therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife? He's quoting Genesis 2. He's saying, well, guys, you want to know the answer to a contemporary social issue? If it's answered in paradise, in Genesis, before the fall, you want to take that answer very seriously and model your marriage off of that. He did the same with the Sabbath. Well, man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for man. Well, when was the Sabbath made? Genesis, right? And so on. You can find gender questions there, race questions there. You can find the origin of evil there. You can find the nature of God there. You can find all sorts of answers to contemporary issues. That's why we go back to Genesis, and that's why it contains the keys to so much of our present concern.
So we have the goodness of humanity, but also the explanation of where the dark side of humanity comes from too, in the fallen nature of mankind. And that in itself, and we might explore this a little further as we talk about some of these other things, but that identity, getting that right, Martyn, that's the foundation for whether you flourish or whether you fail. And so there's chaos on the failure side, there's flourishing on the good side, to discover where our identity is. And we could get this in a deeper conversation too, but our identity in Christ, which brings some way of correcting that which was lost in the fall. We're about to go to news, but I do want to invite listeners. 1-800-316-316, 1-800-316-316. We'll take some calls after Vision National News. Martyn Iles is our guest. His new role is as Chief Ministry Officer for Answers in Genesis. He's graduated to a global platform. We're back with more shortly.